Good evening, good morning. Welcome to week 7 of MPAI 600 in Georgetown School of Continuing Studies Applied Intelligence Program. Uh, just start off with a couple of announcements. We are wrapping up with the course. For most of you, your first course in graduate school, so almost congratulations on it. But as we go through it, I just want to make sure people are aware of some key dates. Assignment 3, if you're not briefing, is due 3 March, Sunday, 11:59 p.m. And then the final is due March 3rd. This week we're going to go through business intel, and then next week there's some not really modules, but there's some readings on artificial intelligence. I'll make them optional, but I want you to focus that last week on the final and the final paper, which I've released for your perusal. So please go ahead and you have your last week dedicated to that, and go ahead and try and don't try, but go ahead and knock those out. And then course evaluations. You should have gotten a course evaluation for this course. Please fill them out. I know they're voluntary, but if we want to make sure that this course and this program is geared towards you, that you're getting the knowledge you need for your professional and the professional development. We also know that there's a very chance you might have me as an instructor again. So if there's issues, please let me know. And if you like me, take my course again in the future. If you don't like me, please don't take that course again. These evaluations let us gauge kind of where we're going as a program. So please, take the 5 minutes and fill them out going forward. So paper 2, I think everyone's gotten theirs back, including the people that presented. So just some issues. I think it was good overall. Some people were really strong. Other people, we could work on it a little bit more. A couple of points. Passive voice is always an issue when I give these papers. I think passive voice is one of those things that people think they know what it is, but don't. And I don't mean to sound like your 10th grade English teacher here, but I want to just make sure everyone's aware of what passive voice is. The boy kicked the ball is an active sentence. Subject, verb, direct object. The ball was kicked by the boy is a passive sentence. Direct object, verb, subject. That's what passive voice is. People get confused. They think it's tense or past tense or something like that. No, it's when the subject of the verb of the sentence ends the sentence. And I do this if you're writing and you see multiple passive sentences, it takes away from the writing. You're trying to figure out what the point is, especially when I have to grade 20 of these papers. Please write in the active sense. In my day job, especially because I have short, concise papers, as most of you probably do, I label out subject, verb, direct object, indirect object, preposition. I actually do that in my sentences so that I know what's passive, what's active. I also try and limit prepositions in my writing because it takes away from your focus. So that's kind of where, what I want to explain with passive voice is. A lot of people do it. Just try and eliminate it from your writing. For this sentence, for this paper, I wanted you to focus on the how the failure contributed. This was the decisive failure. Whether it was Iraq WMD, the inability to properly do human operations, as exemplified by Curveball and Alibi, had a cascading effect on the rest of the intel. Say that and tell me what the decisive variable is. Don't give me, as I mentioned, laundry list. I think it was these 15 factors. Identify what you think the issue was. That was a key point. Some people did it well. Some people kind of mishmashed around, but that's what I was kind of looking for in this paper. And then also ask, as we go forward and as we go in the past, you have to put the intelligence in the context at the time. What a lot of people did, for Pearl Harbor, you listed all these indicators going forward. And then you have to ask, okay, you're kind of giving me the Monday morning quarterbacking here. Everyone can list indicators after the fact, but were the commanders supposed to take reasonable decisions based on, whether it was the GRU memo for Pearl Harbor or the sinking of the midget submarine by the USS Ward at Pearl Harbor. What were the decisions that would have led to success or risk reduction in those cases, and were they reasonable? So don't just give me again all the indicators of a potential attack, in the Yom Kippur War, of the potential attack by the Egyptians against the Israelis. I got it. In hindsight, all those indicators become crystal clear. But based on those indicators, if you're in the shoes of the commander or the political leadership, could reasonable risk reduction measures have been taken? You have to analyze that argument to get full credit for this paper. Another thing I would just say is a couple of people did papers outside the case studies. If you're going to do that in the future, whether it's in this class or a future class you're in with me, please just let me know beforehand what the case study is. Fortunately, I was pretty familiar with whether it was Cuban Missile Crisis, Iranian Revolution. I was pretty familiar with those cases, but I did get one or two very obscure criminal intelligence cases that I was not familiar with, or business intel cases that I was not familiar with. Just let me know ahead of time if you're going to do something like that. So that covers, again, paper 2. And again, if you were late handing it in, there was a couple of people for the issues. I'll get those marked up in the next week or so. But I think everyone who handed in time got their paper back. So review of week 6. The one thing I do want to talk about, lone wolves. Hint, hint, comma, comma. This is a final question. I call it Minding the Gap, which I think is a movie about skateboarding now, but I call it that because I want to talk about when people are on the radar, as we saw in week 5, the European Union or Nadal-san or the Orlando shooter, but they haven't been done to arrest them. How do we solve that issue? That is a key point I want you to try and think about and address in one of your final questions is related to that. How do we do that? Or do we just not do it? I'll let you decide on that. But how do we, again, people are on the radar, but haven't crossed into the threshold of arrestable activity. So getting, again, to week 6 topics, okay, ComStat, was it a decisive factor? A lot of people thought it was. Surprisingly. And again, it was kind of a focusing accountability tool for police precincts and police captains that analyzed good ones, got people to replace bad ones, analyzed crime hotspots, put the right tool to deal with that. And there was that was one of the success points. But again, you had altered reports, as was mentioned in one of the readings, on ComStat, and there's incentives to do that. Incentives, I was just watching a documentary on educational incentives where teachers erased, when teachers are paid based on test scores, you see a lot of erasures in the Scantron test scores, presuming teachers are mixing the system. So when you see incentives to kind of fudge the numbers, so to speak. And then I ask again other factors for the decline in crime, and again a whole series that was brought up in the reading, whether it was demographics, whether it was in this better policing in this case, whether lead, whether it's just a better economy. There's just things to think of for the decline in crime, and then the next, I talked about technologies, and some of you are on the Homeland Security track, and you're going to go into these in pretty depth. But the question to ask is some of the tools that you saw in the Boston Marathon used to solve it. Okay, that's great. You can use it to solve. You have the resources to solve it because it's the biggest case in the country at the time, and probably the biggest case of the year, maybe even the decade. So you can have those advanced forensics and advanced CCTVs and those types of issues. But can that CCTV be applicable for reducing normal crime or preventing normal crime and have a double effect on criminal activity in whatever area it is? And there's a lot of cities, London, Paris, that have spent buku dollars on CCTV, lots of money on that belief that it could be either deterrent or a crime or a good post-forensic tool that can reduce crime. I'll let you decide on whether you think that investment is worth it. But I just wanted to you saw the documentary about Boston Marathon, and it's good to see it in case of a terrorist attack. But the question to ask is, how applicable are those tools for day-to-day crime in a municipality? So those are questions for criminal intelligence. In future courses, I wanted to expose you for this class. Future courses, especially if you're coming from law enforcement, there are other courses that are going to go in depth on criminal intelligence, on things like link analysis and gang defeat, and using open source techniques for investigations, as well as for intelligence on, again, gangs and other criminal networks in a municipality. So you'll get more detail on that in a future course. So week 7 preview, another area is business intelligence. I know we only have 1 or 2 people in this track in this course, but I think it's worthy of getting everyone exposed to it. I think what the lessons you learn from the business community and the business side are applicable, whether you're in national security or in law enforcement. And I think, again, many of you who are coming from law enforcement might be in the private sector. I've worked in the private sector too. So I think you should be exposed to these in a little bit. And for this module, when I'm thinking about business intelligence, I'm thinking about the variables between companies in the same space. Why does Best Buy beat out Circuit City? Circuit City, for those of you who remember what Circuit City was. Why does CVS, especially if you're in the DC area, beat out Walgreens for drugstores? Areas that are in the same space and sell the same products, cater to the same demographics, but there's certain variables that lead to success for one and complete failure for the other. And the question is why? That's what I want you to think about for business intelligence in this week. In future classes, you're going to get more in depth on risk and analytics and those types of issues. But for now, we're looking at variables between companies in the same space. You're going to have Dr. Galad interview, who's kind of the founder of business intelligence. You have a real treat with him, and his viewpoints are really second to none. And as I mentioned, businesses that operate in the same space. What leads to success? What leads to failures? And then I asked Dr. Galad in the interview, what are applications to national security issues, just because he'd worked in the Israeli intelligence services, and he can definitely see both sides of the issue. So with that being said, I look forward to your questions, and if there's issues, please let me know.